Okay, today we're going to be doing section 4.7, which is the quadratic formula. The quadratic formula is used to derived by completing the square, which we are not going to do, but it's used to find the x-intercepts of a polynomial, and it also tells us what type of roots we're going to have. The quadratic formula is x equals negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. Okay, so that's our quadratic formula, and the more you sing something, the more you remember it. So it's super important that you get that formula. Okay, in addition to that, we have 0 is equal to ax squared plus bx plus c. That is what you're going to use it on. Now, the discriminant is the part of the radical that is underneath the root. Okay, it's the b squared minus 4ac. And there are three scenarios. We have the scenario when x is greater than 0, when x is equal to 0, and when x is less than 0. X being the discriminant value. So when b squared minus 4ac is greater than 0, then you have two real roots. They're either rational or irrational. How do I determine if they're rational versus irrational? Well, if they're rational, they are perfect squares. If they are not rational, then that means that I cannot simplify them, and I'm going to have something left underneath the radical, which means it's not a perfect square. Okay? Then the next one is going to be if b squared minus 4ac is equal to 0. This means I have a double root, and this means it is a repeated root. What happens when it's a double root is it touches the x-axis at one point and shoots back up, or touches the axis at one point and shoots back down. Okay? My last one is going to be b squared minus 4ac is less than 0. If it's less than 0, we learned this before in section 4.8, that whenever we're doing imaginary numbers, you are going to have no real solutions and they are imaginary. If it's imaginary, that means it's not crossing the x-axis on the real axis. It's above the graph completely, above the x-axis completely, or below the x-axis completely. So let's take a little bit of a visual here so that you're able to see what I'm talking about. So when b squared minus 4ac is greater than 0, I have two real solutions, either rational or irrational. You can visibly see where they are crossing the x-axis. Okay? When it is equal to 0, then that means I'm going to have one real solution, which is a double. And remember, I said it touches it in one spot and either shoots back up or shoots back down. And our last one is going to be when b squared minus 4ac is less than it. And I said the entire graph is going to be above the x-axis, or the entire graph would be below the x-axis. So those are what it means to be the three different values. Today we are only focusing on b squared minus 4ac and what happens. So it's interpretation of the b squared minus 4ac. Okay? So here we go. Use the discriminant to determine the types of solutions you will have. So my discriminant is going to be b squared minus 4ac. So the very first thing you need to do is identify a, b, and c. Is this thing set equal to 0? Yes, it is. So since it is equal to 0, I can identify a, b, and c. A is equal to -2, B is equal to -3, and C is equal to 5. So you're simply going to plug those values in. So this is going to be -3, putting in parentheses because the negative has to be squared as well, minus 4 times -2 times 5. -3 times -3 is 9. Negative times a negative is a positive. 4 times 2 is 8 times 5 is 40 to give me 49. So that is the value of my discriminant. So you're going to box that in. But the next thing you're going to do is compare that to the value 0. Is 49 greater than 0, equal to 0, or less than? It is greater than, which means I'm going to have two real solutions. Now you have to determine if that is a perfect square or if it's not a perfect square to determine if it's rational or irrational. Meaning, if I take the square root of 49, it's going to come out as a 7, which means I'm going to have two rational solutions, okay? Let's do that again. Use the discriminant to determine the types of solutions you will have. So step 1, is it equal to 0? Yes, it is. So A is equal to -4, B is equal to 20, and C is equal to -25. And then you're going to write B squared minus 4 times A times C. B is 20, I'm squaring that, 4, A is -4, and C is -25. So, a little bit of math here. 20 times 20 is 2 times 2 with 2 zeros. So that's going to be 400. 1, 2, 3 negatives. 3 negatives means the outcome is negative. So then I'm going to multiply these two numbers first. 4 times 25, so 4 quarters in your hand is $1, times 4 gives you 400. So 400 minus 400 is 0. That is your discriminant value. Now, you are going to compare and contrast 0, which is your discriminant, to the value 0. Is it less than, greater than, or equal to? It is equal to it, which means I'm going to have one double root, meaning it is going to touch the graph in one spot and either shoot back up or shoot back down. How do I know what it's going to do? It's actually going to touch it in one spot and shoot back down because it's a -4 is my A value. Okay? Next, same exact thing. Use the discriminant to determine the types of solutions you will have. So I need to go ahead and set this thing equal to 0. So I'm going to do that by subtracting 5. So now that it's equal to 0, I'm going to go ahead and find A, which is 4, B, which is 3, and C, which is -5. And I'm going to simply do B squared minus 4 times A times C. So 3 squared minus 4 times -5. 3 squared is 9. 2 negatives makes a positive. 5 times 4, I'm going to do that first. Oops, did not mean to erase. 5 times 4 is going to give me 20, times 4 gives me 80. So this gives me 89. That is your discriminant. Now we are going to take 89 and compare it to 0. Is it less than, greater than, or equal to? 89 is greater than 0, which means I am going to have two real roots. Now I want to determine if those real roots are rational or irrational. The way we do that is by taking the square root. Is 81 a perfect square? The answer to that is no, it is not. So therefore, I'm going to have two irrational roots, meaning the square root will remain in your answer. Okay? Next, same exact concept. I need to distribute this. So this is going to give me a 4x squared plus a 4x is equal to 7. So now I'm going to bring that 7 over. 4x squared plus 4x minus 7 is equal to 0. Now determine A, which is 4, B, which is 4, and C, which is -7. Write down B squared minus 4 times A times C. B squared is going to be a 4 squared minus 4 times a 4 times a -7. So B squared is 4 squared, which is 16. A double negative creates a positive. Now, 4 times 4 is 16 times 7. Many of you are not going to know that, so that's totally okay to do 4 times 4 times 7. And that equals 112. 112 plus 16 is going to give you 128. That right there is going to be your lovely discriminant. So 128 compared to 0 is greater than it. So since it's greater, I'm going to have two real solutions. Now I need you to determine if they're rational or irrational. So I'm going to come over here to my calculator, and I'm going to take the square root of 128. You can tell that it's not a whole number, so therefore I know that this thing is not going to be rational, but rather irrational. Okay? Tonight's homework is 4-7, worksheet 1.